guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, a really big welcome. My name's Jenny and I make loads of lifestyle content on this channel. So I make things like weekly vlogs and videos about chronic illness, disability, mental health, Disney, a bit of fashion, beauty, travel, and pretty much everything in between. So hopefully there'll be a video here that you enjoy, and I really hope you stick around to watch this video. So I'm back with my second video for EDS Awareness Month, and this one is focusing on medical people who have a lack of understanding or compassion for people with EDS and how this has impacted the care and treatment that people have received. Again, like the last video, I have got some brilliant people with EDS who have kindly taken part and shared their stories, so hopefully it will really help to hear a variety of voices and to hear the different experiences that people have gone through. And yeah, hopefully hearing this lack of understanding and lack of compassion will help to raise awareness of how important it is for medical professionals to be taught about EDS at medical school, because currently they don't get taught an awful lot. You still meet a lot of medical professionals who just don't know much about what EDS is. So I'm hoping that this video will just help to raise awareness of why it is so important that there's greater education amongst medical professionals, because it will help to improve the care and treatment that people with EDS are given.
One of the main ones that I run into as far as medical professionals not having knowledge on EDS is that you can't have EDS if you aren't extremely thin. So I'm very, very tall, but I am not very thin. And so I've had doctors come in and doubt my diagnosis from a geneticist just solely because of the fact that I'm not very thin. And they don't know anything else about me. They just look at me, see I'm not very thin, and go, well, you can't have EDS. And so that's been a real challenge for sure. And doctors will be absolutely shocked at the fact that I'm as hypermobile as I am, being the weight that I am. They say that that shouldn't be possible, but I do exist. So another one that I unfortunately run into from doctors is that EDS doesn't cause pain. And we clearly, as patients, know that that's not right. It's in all of the medical journals that it's not right. It's on the EDS Society that that's not right. But nevertheless, I do get doctors every so often, even like senior people in their field, telling me that EDS can't cause pain, and that is extremely frustrating. I definitely think these attitudes affected the care that I was offered, especially because believing that EDS doesn't cause pain causes them to not take that seriously and then not offer you any services, disbelieve your experiences. And I was told for so many years as a kid, when I would complain about pain and hurting myself all the time and like lots of things that looking back were definitely symptoms of EDS, I would just be told that it was normal and that everyone has pain all the time. So I really didn't know that that wasn't reality. So I definitely believe it impacted how long it took me to get a diagnosis, for sure, and probably the care I received afterwards.
I was told by a medical professional that my symptoms were normal after having a baby, or that I was having anxiety from my husband's deployment.
Before my diagnosis, as I said, I went to another doctor to question this new thing that was happening to me. I'd seen plenty of doctors before that had mitigated symptoms, my flat feet, my hypermobility, my heart issues, my Raynaud's, and it was all treated as a bunch of different things until I collated it together as one thing. So the only doctor that sticks out is the first doctor I saw before seeing the second doctor, and she didn't even look at my notes, shrugged, and sent me off. The second doctor also openly admitted that she had no clue what Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome was. That to me was actually a good thing. I came to her with a problem. She admitted that she'd never heard of it, but she decided that she was going to dig deeper into it. And then that night, when she discussed this with her husband, who is also a doctor and the head of the practice, he informed her of a memo that he had received from rheumatology that day, that he was going to share with the practice the next day about this condition called Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome and how they may have been misdiagnosing people for years, and it updated their procedural practices. I feel like EDS is a very new thing in the UK. I feel like it's been known in the US for a lot longer, and our doctors are only now coming up to speed with it. I rarely meet a medical professional that I can say, oh yeah, I have EDS to, and they go, oh okay. Every single time it's, oh, what's that? And I have to explain to them what it is and how it affects me. And I just feel like a lot more awareness and a lot more needs to be done to inform doctors who are probably trying to do their best for their patient, but they just don't have all the information. The very fact that nobody had put this together from birth to, you know, at the time 24, that I had this condition, nobody thought to look at all these separate symptoms and go, maybe there's something going on there, because they didn't know about it. They hadn't heard about it. There'd been no training in this disease. And then with the first doctor I went to, who shrugged it off and just wasn't entertaining anything I said, if she'd had the correct training or even cared to look into something, then I feel like I would have been diagnosed faster. The second doctor, because of her attitude, I think that helped, although it did delay my diagnosis for a month, which in the long term is not a massive thing. But, you know, there was no way for her to go, yeah, that's what's happening.
So it took me a long time to get here though. I was dismissed by so many doctors in the past, and I was told that my pain was in my head or that I was imagining it. I was told that I was just depressed and stressed. So I just felt though that there was something wrong. Like for a while I would question my sanity, and I was like, well, you know, am I imagining this? But I just felt like there was something wrong. So I just kept searching and searching, and I just did not give up. And so if you feel like you're being dismissed or not taken seriously, what I would recommend is finding a good support group in your local area or in your state, and maybe asking for, you know, recommendations on doctors. So I found a support group here in Alaska where I live. It was EDS support group, and that's how I found a lot of the doctors that I have today. But I also have learned to be my own advocate and do my own research. And so I have been able to educate my primary doctor so that she can help other people. Because when I first started seeing my primary doctor, she wasn't very knowledgeable in EDS. Like, she had heard of it, but she didn't know much about it. So I'd give her literature and give her different websites to look at. Another thing is finding a good physical therapist, one that understands what EDS is, one that's not gonna make you do exercises that are gonna make your joints worse, but one that's going to be super gentle with you.
Have I had any experiences with medical professionals who lacked an understanding of EDS? Yes, most definitely. Probably way too many to recall. I saw multiple chiropractors and massage therapists who only further hurt me or made my pain worse, and they kind of just insisted that they keep going or try it again, and it didn't help. I also had physical therapists, mainly for my knees, that would try to get me to do lunges and squats and things and use weights that actually just made my problem worse as well. And I would explain that to them, but I also didn't have my diagnosis yet, so they just acted like I needed to push through. Also, the geneticist who officially diagnosed my EDS, he knew about EDS, but he seemed to lack an understanding of the fact that all of these other bizarre symptoms could be connected. It seemed like he was under the impression that it just meant dislocations and pain, and that was pretty frustrating because I thought I would get a lot more information from him. But then once I joined all these support groups and started talking to people who also have Ehlers-Danlos, I found out that we all have all these issues, whether it's GI issues, asthma, so many other things that seem connected. Do I think those experiences impacted the time it took to get a diagnosis or care? I do. I don't blame any of the doctors or medical professionals that I saw for all those years, because EDS, it's now becoming more well known, but years or decades ago it wasn't, and I don't think there's any way that most of them that I saw could have known, but I definitely think that impacted the time it took.
I had a lot of pain throughout my body. I was an active baseball player, and I went to many doctor's appointments. No one had any idea. They all attributed it to just growing pains. Take some Advil and carry on. That did nothing for me until finally I had a breakthrough. My mom got a recommendation from someone else and said, you should get tested for Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. Boom. Diagnosed. What did that lead to? Well, not much. Hey, stop playing baseball. That didn't solve all my problems.
I have two clear memories, actually. The first one was I was waiting for my EDS diagnosis appointment, and just to have the confirmation. And I needed some physiotherapy session because I have a lot of tendinitis, and I needed to go back. So I went to this general doctor, and I chose him because he was young and he worked at the hospital. So I thought that as he was young, and I know that EDS is taught in med school right now in France, so I thought that maybe he was a good fit for me. But but when I came to his office, he first asked me what was my medical history. So I explained him that I was almost finally diagnosed with EDS, and I was waiting the final result, but everything was already looks like it was that my problem. And he looked at me. I mean, there were no other questions. He didn't look at me or anything. We just talk like 2 minutes, and like for 2 minutes. And he told me, EDS, are you sure? Because I don't believe in this disease. So yeah, I was like, okay. In my head I was like, okay, I'm done with you. Okay, just give me my prescription. I want to go out of there. So yeah, I'm laughing right now, but on the moment I just wanted to slap him. I was so angry. I felt so not heard and so desperate in some way. I was angry, actually. So this was my first one. And the second one was my actual doctor, which is terrible. And last year I had a very tough period with my right shoulder. And So I came to her, I had some ultrasound and x-ray, and all my tendons are very damaged. And I started to ask some question about it because I was a bit worried to not be able to do my stuff, and maybe had to go to surgery or something, because I was afraid that one of them just broke. So I asked some question, and she looked at me and said, "Oh, but you're 40. Your shoulder, it's normal. You have nothing wrong. It's absolutely not related to EDS." And I was like, okay, but tendons are like full of collagen, and this is a conjunctive tissue, so I mean everything is related to EDS. But yeah, I wasn't I was too much in pain to want to argue with her or to explain anything, so I just shut my mouth, take my prescription, and there is no impact because the reason is that I went to a special center to have the diagnosis, so my regular doctor was not involved at all. I asked her to write me a letter to explain what she sees in me, but she never did it. So
I have had many experiences over the years of medical professionals who have just lacked understanding of EDS, or perhaps haven't shown much compassion. It has been quite difficult. There is a lot of misinformation, and it kind of varies. You know, some people will just think that EDS means that you're a bit bendy, and they don't really understand all of the other symptoms and everything that come with it. Whereas I've met some medical professionals who have had quite dangerous views, I would say. I remember going to see one professional before I got my diagnosis. It was around the time that we were my GP had suspected it, and we were trying to get help for it. And this medical professional basically said to me, well, it doesn't really matter if you get a diagnosis or not. You know, having a diagnosis won't change anything, because there's nothing we can do for you anyway. And I remember coming out of that meeting with them and just bursting into tears, because I just felt so alone, and I felt so hopeless, because I thought, well, is there any point in me getting a diagnosis? And I don't know, I think I just felt like, am I actually going to get any help with this? Because I know that there isn't a cure for EDS, but for me, having a diagnosis is extremely important, because one, you know, it means that I know what's going on with my body. I know that there is a physical problem there, and that's why I'm having all of these problems. Two, it's important because once you get the EDS diagnosis, doctors start to understand the comorbidities that come with EDS, so you can be referred to the right people to get the right help for those comorbidities. And also three, getting a diagnosis is important because it helps, you know, professionals to understand just how many people are affected by EDS, and hopefully that will impact on education and research. So I felt that his opinion of diagnosis was incredibly harmful and wrong, and they shouldn't be saying that to patients, because diagnosis is important. I know some people don't like labels, but I think the positives for giving a label, giving a diagnosis, outweigh the negatives, because rather than fighting with the unknown, you know what you're dealing with. And then I've also just had, so many comments about, oh, you shouldn't be in pain with EDS. EDS, shouldn't be causing you digestive problems or anything like that. With like the comorbidities, I had someone saying, well, if you had gastroparesis, you should just be being sick all the time and you should be really skinny. And it's like, people don't realise that you know, there's different severities of EDS and the illnesses that come with it, and that they can change over time. And also I've just had the straight up, like, you know, you tell them you've got EDS and they just say, oh, what's that? And it's like, wow. If you don't know what EDS is, like, I don't know what to do, because, you know, for when you're seeing any medical professional, it's so important that they understand EDS and, you know, the risks that come with that if you're doing surgeries and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's had a big impact on my, you know, on my care, on getting a diagnosis. If there'd been more education and understanding about EDS, I may not have had to wait quite so long to get the diagnosis. And if I hadn't waited so long, my mental health may not have got so bad. I may have been able to get sort of help and support earlier on. But certainly when I was going through my diagnosis procedure, there just wasn't that understanding of EDS and connecting the dots and, you know, picking up on how it affects people. So it definitely stopped me getting a diagnosis quickly, and I think it's definitely impacted my care, because some doctors just don't have that understanding of it, so they may suggest medications or treatments that aren't suitable for you. I'm lucky that I have found a good, like, group of doctors who have, you know, even if it's a fairly basic understanding of it, but they're willing to understand more, they're willing to research and stuff, and that's just so important. And so yeah, I just think if anything comes from this video, that it needs to be that more education is needed in medical training, but also refresher training as well, to try and improve the lives of people with EDS.
Yes, I've had such experience. First, the doctor didn't believe me. Then he suggested that I was reading on the internet too much. Then actually I proved him wrong. And after that, he asked me, so what shall I do to you now? How shall I treat you? I don't know what to prescribe because you have so many comorbidities. Yes, I think it had some impact. Actually, almost none of the doctors initiated any further research, so I did it all myself, and I didn't know where to dig, but luckily and thank God, I found the doctors who knew something and who led me in the right direction.
Taking this long to find a diagnosis had a significant impact on my mental health, on my physical health, and on my enjoyment of life. I met many doctors who had no answers for me and attributed symptoms to poor mental health, attention-seeking behaviors, and hypochondriac, none of which ended up being true at all. The pain became so unmanageable for me that I became nearly cognitively impaired from the high levels of pain that I was experiencing. I spent many days in and out of hospital trying to figure out some answers when doctors told me they had no idea what was wrong. The severe impact from doctors' lack of education on EDS was huge. It leaves us as patients zero answers, zero solutions, and doesn't allow us any empathy or care or treatment options.
Let's talk about gaslighting. Since a few years getting worse, I went through really unpleasant experiences because of the misinformation that the people have about this syndrome, and a lot of misdiagnosis and bad taste comments like it was just anxiety and that everything was in my head, or that there were no biological causes to have all of those symptoms. And on top of that, no one believed in me, or they say that it was psychosomatic, making all worse, really. And it hurts so much. So even after the EDS diagnosis, I still face comments like that, because even though now I have an answer for them, and this is unknown, and it's really unfair because no one deserves to be sick and have to wait more than 20 years for receiving care. That's so sad, and it's bad.
Algo que llegué a escuchar mucho de los profesionales de la salud en relación a mis síntomas era: es que eres muy flexible, o solo eres muy flexible, no pasa nada. Y yo no entendía cómo algo bueno podía ocasionarme tanto dolor y hacerme más propensa a lesiones. Fue cuando empecé a investigar y aprendí que el ser flexible no es lo mismo que ser hiperlaxo. Al ver mi flexibilidad como algo bueno, no permitía a los profesionales de la salud a ver más allá. No veían a mi hiperlaxitud como un factor de riesgo o como la causante de mis síntomas. Difícilmente me mandaban a hacer estudios o me mandaban interconsulta con algún otro especialista. Por lo general el manejo y el abordaje era como a cualquier otra persona, ya sea una fisioterapia, pero no especializada en hiperlaxitud, o en fármacos como analgésicos y relajantes musculares que por lo general no tenía algún beneficio o únicamente la mejoría era a corto plazo y regresábamos al punto inicial.
As I said, my first orthopedist dismissed all my symptoms, just gave me the diagnosis hypermobility disorder, hypermobility syndrome, that's how they call it in Germany. Just that my problem is my hypermobility, but he always said it's caused by ballet, which it's not caused by ballet, it's caused by my Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. So I think that this had an impact on me getting my diagnosis only now. And other bad experiences were where I went for my shoulder, but I showed them I have EDS, and they kind of were like, okay, we don't really know what this is, and also told me I'm exaggerating my symptoms and that my shoulder is not dislocated and stuff. But anyways, I've had those bad experiences with people just dismissing my pain and symptoms, but I don't really care about that anymore. I think that this impacted me severely because it took me several years, even though my symptoms, according to the geneticists, were pretty obvious. And also the care that I need. I wasn't offered enough physical therapy or the right physical therapy. And also I probably need braces or mobility aids. I will see a specialist though, but I still haven't seen a specialist for my joints, so I do think that this impacted the time it took to get diagnosis and the right treatment, because there aren't enough doctors who are aware of this and to specialize in this, and because basically symptoms were dismissed all the time.
I have definitely had several of these experiences. I've had them before and after I've been diagnosed. When I had them before, the first one that comes to mind is when I was referred to a rheumatologist. I asked if it could be possible that I could have some kind of connective tissue disorder such as Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, because I had learned about it in my genetics class and everything just kind of seemed to click when I read about it and when I was taught what it was. And so that's why I was asking about it. And he immediately just said no. He hadn't even looked at me and hadn't done physical examination or clinical history. He just immediately said no because I didn't have a Marfan phenotype, which it is possible that some kinds of EDS presents with a Marfan-like phenotype, which would be arachnodactyly, the different changes of your face, but that doesn't mean that if you don't have a Marfan phenotype, you're excluded from EDS diagnosis. And I just remember being very confused about that, and I didn't understand why that was the answer, and that kind of just sent me into this state of mind that it was impossible for me to have something like that, and well, here I am. And the experiences that I've had after diagnosis were pretty much with doctors not believing me, doctors that were of specialties that were different to genetics. I've had it with orthopedic doctors, with GIs, and they basically just don't believe me. And they think that it's not a real diagnosis, that they've seen patients like that and they're like circus contortionists, so I can't possibly have EDS. I definitely do think it impacted the time it took me to get a diagnosis, because I feel like the doctors that I had seen here were just not familiar with this syndrome. A lot of them knew what Marfan syndrome was, but they didn't really know what EDS was. And so it just sounded so weird to them. And they only had the image in their head that it had to be like a circus contortionist for it to be EDS. And so I think that really, really stepped back my diagnosis. And also the fact that they would assume that I was either making up the pain, that it was because of stress, or that it was psychological pain, like psychosomatic syndromes or something of that sort. And they would end up prescribing me NSAIDs for 2 weeks with anti-inflammatories sometimes, and they would just expect the pain and the dislocations and subluxations to stop, and obviously they wouldn't, and the pain meds didn't even help. So I do think that impacted the time it took me to get a diagnosis. And regarding the care, I think it's also affected it, because after diagnosis, even though you would think that the doctors would take it seriously, knowing that I already have a diagnosis, a lot of the times they don't, and so they don't offer me the type of care that you would offer an EDS patient, knowing that it's a chronic illness. They offer me short-term solutions, like I said, like taking NSAIDs for 2 weeks, which isn't sustainable for chronic pain or for something that's going to keep happening even if you take your NSAIDs for 2 weeks.
I've had many encounters with doctors and medical professionals who know nothing about Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, or who call it the stretchy disease, or who can't understand that it affects more than just your joints. It can affect your whole body, and I think that's a problem. I've had doctors call me dramatic. I've had them call me a lot of names, but my main issue is when I finally have the diagnosis and they don't see the problem. They don't see that it's affecting my whole body, my digestive system, my nervous system. They don't see that. They just think that I'm sore. This lack of understanding definitely impacted the time it took for me to be diagnosed. My doctor, when I was first getting diagnosed, did not want me to have that diagnosis. She thought that it was enough to treat the symptoms and not go through with the diagnosis. She did not want to give me that peace of mind. She did not care about my peace of mind. She just wanted me out of her office. She wanted to treat the symptoms and be done with it. So she did not want me to have that diagnosis, and I had to drop her to obtain it. But I did.
So I've definitely had experience with misinformed doctors. I would say I had the same primary care doctor up until I was about 25. And unfortunately, as much as I appreciated the care that I did get during my time with him, there wasn't any digging. You know, there's definitely doctors who are more the lifelong learner type, the curious type, and then there are ones who just kind of, you know, are a little more this plus this equals this type of behavior. So I would say that I've definitely had a lot of misinformed doctors. What I was recommended to go to was a place that had residents, because they're a little more fresh and you know, they work with more experienced doctors. However, with that, I'm often treated as some sort of rare special case, but without any follow-up. So I've definitely had to go to a lot of specialists. And the misinformation, I think, is definitely why my diagnosis took me a long time. And I know there's people out there who have waited way more, you know, into their middle age, 50s, 60s. But I'm just grateful that I know now, because there's things that I can do that aid in not so much prevention, but just better care of self, better awareness of how I'm interacting with my body.
I've had various medical professionals before and after diagnosis, whether it's to the pain clinic or speaking to various doctors or physiotherapy throughout my teens, my childhood and also adulthood. Getting a diagnosis straight away has caused miscommunication and vagueness, hence why it took so long to get my diagnosis, and to the point that I wasn't sure what I had.
So I really hope that you found this video helpful in understanding the kind of misunderstandings and lack of education that we can face when we've got EDS, and the difficulties that this can present for getting a diagnosis and getting treatment and support. Thank you so much to the people that have taken part in this video. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your stories, and hopefully they will help raise awareness and perhaps bring about some more change to improve our lives. If you have enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more from me, please give me a like and subscribe to my channel. Also hit the notification bell, that means you'll get notified every time I upload a video so you don't miss anything. Leave me a comment, let me know what kind of lack of understandings or misconceptions you have faced, whether it's with EDS or another illness. It would be really interesting to just hear your stories and what you have experienced over the time. And also let me know if there's any particular videos you'd like to see, whether they're related to EDS or something else. It would be good to know what sort of stuff you'd like to see. Also come and follow me on social media. My links are in the description below, but I will put my Instagram and Twitter up here. Those are the two platforms that I'm mainly on, so again, do come over, say hello. It would be lovely to talk to you, and I'll see you in another video very soon. Bye!